81-year-old veteran slapped in diner, but wait, for his son's unexpected life-changing rescue. Frank was a staple at Mabel's diner. Every morning, he would settle into his favorite booth, a chipped seat next to the window where sunlight poured in, warming his weathered face. With an easy smile, he'd sip on his black coffee, his hands shaking ever so slightly with age and memories that seemed to linger in the air around him. The patrons adored him. Children would lean toward him, eager to hear tales of bravery and sacrifice. Frank would regale them with stories of his time in the military, and though he carried the weight of loss and camaraderie in his heart, he always ended with a smile that shone brighter than the morning sun. On this particular day, the familiar hum of chatter was replaced by a tense silence. The door swung open violently, and in strode a young man, arrogance radiating from him like heat from a fire. He strutted like he owned the place, tossing around scornful glances that made everyone uncomfortable. Suddenly, he made his way to Frank, towering over him like a dark thundercloud. Without warning, he delivered a sharp slap across Frank's face, tearing through the fabric of the diner's warmth and leaving an echo of stunned gasps in its wake. Time froze. All eyes turned to Frank, who sat in disbelief, his hand instinctively pressed to his cheek. His gentle spirit, once so vibrant, seemed momentarily dimmed by that jarring act. Jake, Frank's son, was present, caught in a storm of conflicting emotions. His heart pounded in his chest, a protective instinct battling with the fear of what he might lose if he stepped into the fray. Just a single glance at his father, where hurt replaced his usual warmth, ignited a fire in Jake that he didn't know could still burn so fiercely. Around them, patrons exchanged nervous whispers, revealing a community suddenly fractured. They were more than mere witnesses. They shared a silence heavy with unification and unspoken indignation. Jake looked into their eyes, noticing the anger bubbling beneath the surface, bonding them in defiance against the injustice they all felt. It was no longer just about him and Frank. It was a collective cry for respect and dignity, a rally against the disdain that had crept into their lives. As the air thickened with indignation, that storm inside Jake rumbled louder. Defending his father wasn't merely an act of loyalty. It was about standing firm for every veteran, for every unsung hero who had endured unfairness long past. He clenched his fists, knowing he had a choice to make. Just then, he caught a glimpse of old Mrs. Delaney, a veteran herself, her eyes glistening like the dew on grass in the early morning light. She nodded at him, an encouragement, possibly a reminder of what Frank had fought for. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With that reminder hanging in the air, Jake took a deep breath, feeling hope rise like a tide within him. He could almost hear it, the unifying heartbeat of the community, beneath the shock and tension. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, the door swung open again, this time revealing a figure familiar yet unexpected. Someone whose appearance might just turn the tide of emotion and transform the scene altogether. Jake's heart raced. Could this be the moment that would shift everything for Frank, for their family, for the community they cherished? As the door creaked open, Jake squinted through the bright sunlight. He felt the tension in the diner thicken as the figure stepped inside. It was Mark, Frank's old military buddy, someone who Jake hadn't seen in over a decade. Mark strode in like a gust of fresh air, his frame robust, a little weathered by time, but the spirit in his eyes remained fierce and unwavering. "Frank!" Mark shouted, his voice cutting through the heavy atmosphere. The diner exploded in a mix of surprise and hope. Eyes darted back to Frank, who slowly blinked as he processed the sudden arrival. Jake felt an electric jolt surge through him. As memories flooded back of late-night talks filled with laughter and tears, he saw a flicker of recognition in his father's eyes. Mark rushed over, wrapping his arms around Frank in a tight embrace, and for a moment, the diner melted away altogether. In that instant, it felt like a reunion of brothers, two souls connected by shared battles and a history none could ever understand. What happened here? Mark's voice dropped as he stepped back, surveying the diner's patrons and then landing on the young man who had slapped Frank. Anger flashed in Mark's eyes, fierce as a wildfire. You got some nerve. Jake stepped up beside Mark, feeling fortified by his father's old friend. It's not just about Dad anymore. This isn't just a slap. It feels like an attack on all of us, on everyone who fought and sacrificed. The young man's arrogance began to falter. This wasn't just an audience anymore. It was a wall of support, standing strong against the injustice he had dared to deliver. Mark turned to the diners, his booming voice rallying everyone. What kind of place do you want this to be? Because you can't let someone walk in here and disrespect a man who fought for your freedom. His words echoed in the air, igniting a wave of murmurs throughout the diner. Expressions began to shift amongst the patrons. Anger replaced hesitance. A few stood, fists clenched, their voices lifting in agreement with Mark. We won't stand for this, someone shouted from the back. The sense of unity was infectious, spreading through the diner like smoke from a fire. Frank, still sitting, felt a rush of warmth pulse through him. No longer was he just an old veteran at a diner. He was a symbol, a testament to resilience. Jake saw the pride swell in his father's chest, the vibrancy returning to his eyes. Feeling the room stir, Jake turned back to the young man, whose bravado cracked under the pressure of confrontation. You thought you could just come in here and do this without facing the fallout? As the tension escalated, the young man stumbled back, realizing he was now cornered by strength, both old and new. He opened his mouth to protest but found little support. With a deep breath, Jake took one step closer. His heart was pounding, a mix of anger and passion surging through him. It's time to face the truth, buddy. We're not going to let anyone disrespect my dad or anyone who has served. You have no idea what we stand for. Mark nodded, standing proudly beside Jake and Frank, a trio united against bullying. The atmosphere shifted, thick with determination, with camaraderie, echoing the essence of what true community meant. Just when the young man looked ready to turn and flee, a sudden voice broke through the noise. It was Mabel, the diner's owner, standing tall near the kitchen entrance. Enough! Let us not forget that this diner belongs to all of us. It's time we stand and protect what we've built together. All eyes turned to her, the resolve in her voice undeniable. But as she stepped forward, something glinting caught Jake's eye, a small badge she wore on her apron, one he recognized. It was the same badge given only to those who had honored service. Wait, Jake said, the realization dawning on him. Mabel, are you? The sudden silence held promise for a revelation. Mabel paused, her gaze steady and challenging, as murmurs rippled through the diner. The energy shifted again, hanging thick in the air like a storm about to break. Jake's heart raced. Could Mabel really be part of the same world as his dad, the world of veterans and sacrifice? Yes, she said, her voice strong and unwavering. I served too. I was in the Air Force during the Gulf War. This badge, she gestured to the insignia on her apron. It means more than just a part of my uniform. It represents a bond, a shared commitment to those who fight for our country. The diner erupted into whispers and incredulous glances. Conversations intersected, people leaning towards one another, their words a blend of disbelief and respect. Jake's eyes widened. He had grown up hearing stories of his dad's comrades, but never once had he thought he'd find another veteran in the diner that felt like home. That's incredible, Mabel, Jake said, stepping forward. But why didn't you say anything before? I didn't want the focus on me, she replied, her expression softening but her determination still shining through. Tonight was about Frank, about standing up for someone who deserved respect. I didn't want anyone to think I was trying to steal his thunder. Frank, still at the booth, was now watching Mabel with tears pooling in his eyes. The warmth spread throughout the diner, filling the space with a sense of solidarity that none had expected. The younger man who had slapped him looked even smaller now, crumbling under the weight of the growing crowd's energy. "Is that why you stand up, Mabel?" Mark interjected, his voice resonating in the charged atmosphere. "Because inside you know what they've gone through? Because you serve to protect these men and women when they come home and need a place to belong?" "Yes," Mabel said, her voice lifting to match his passion. "And this diner is a place for everyone. Veterans, families, and those who just want a warm meal. But it's also a sanctuary. We can't allow disrespect to thrive here." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks at the thought that a woman he had known for years harbored such a striking secret. Yet all of this made sense now: her fierce protection of the diner, her unwavering support for the community. It was more than a livelihood. It was a mission fueled by the collective energy spilling from every corner of the diner. Mark moved closer to the young man, who was now visibly shaken. "You need to understand something," he said, growling slightly. "This isn't just about one man. This is about respect. About love. These men and women risk everything so you can have the freedom to act like a fool." The young man shuffled back, staring at Mark and then at Frank. Each veteran stood resolute, their presence a reminder of experiences that shaped their lives, their families, and their community. Silence fell again, but this time it was filled with the weight of shared stories and collective strength. "What he needs to understand is that we will protect our own," Jake insisted, stepping forward again. The young man was cornered, with the trio of comrades Mark, Frank, and Mabel surrounding him. "You don't get to just walk away from this." Just then, a voice from the back broke the heavy silence again. "What should we do with him, then?" asked a familiar voice, pitting sentiment against challenge. It was Oliver, a regular at the diner, but his demeanor suggested he was more than just an observer now. The tension shifted again as everyone turned to Oliver, sensing a turning point but uncertain of what would unfold. Jake felt his heart racing. Would they really figure out how to move forward together? Would the diner be able to restore peace and remain a haven for all? As the air buzzed with anticipation, Jake took a deep breath, fully aware of how much was riding on this moment. What would happen next? Oliver's eyes glinted under the dim lights, his expression a mix of curiosity and seriousness. "What do you think we should do, Mabel?" he asked, putting the ball back in her court. Mabel squared her shoulders, the diner falling into a heavier silence as all eyes turned towards her. "We've all seen guys like him," she said, her voice steady but firm. "But turning this into something ugly won't help anyone, especially Frank. We need to find a way to open the door to understanding instead." "But he's disrespected someone who knows what it means to fight and sacrifice." Mark shot back. He was visibly frustrated, fists clenched at his sides, as if his body was struggling between defending the vulnerable and grappling with his anger. "Does he even know what he did?" Mabel sighed, her gaze softening as she looked at the young man, who was now trembling slightly, his bravado all but vanished. "I doubt he does, and if our goal is to educate him, we can't do that through raising our voices or fists. We need to teach him." Frank looked on, his eyes locking onto Mabel's. A deep sense of gratitude washed over him. "She's right," he said, his voice rich with hard-earned wisdom. "Maybe he doesn't know any better. Maybe he hasn't seen the world through eyes like ours." The crowd murmured, some nodding slowly, a ripple of realization spreading. Jake blinked back a rush of emotions, pride swelling in his chest for Mabel and the veterans. This wasn't just a diner, it was a place where lessons were taught, where understanding could replace ignorance. Oliver chimed in, brushing a hand through his hair. "So what do we do? Just let him go? Let him walk away and think this is okay?" Mabel shook her head. "No, we all stand here, together. The point is to turn this moment into a lesson not just for him, but for all of us." Jake stepped forward, feeling the energy lift slightly. Maybe he could listen to Frank, hear a little about what it really means to be a veteran. The young man blinked at Jake, confused but curious. "You think he wants to talk to me?" Frank's eyes narrowed slightly, but then settled into a calmness that came with age. "I'd be willing to say a few words. Sometimes it's the hardest conversations that lead to breakthroughs." Mark threw out a contemplative look, still hesitant. But how do we know he won tea? Just shrug it off? He glanced around the diner. The crowd was engaged now, anticipation rippling like heat waves in the air. Then we won't let him, Mabel declared firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. We hold each other accountable. That's what community means. The young man, visibly nervous, swallowed hard. His hesitation was palpable, but curiosity flickered in his eyes. I'll listen, he said, the words finally tumbling out. Mabel gave him an encouraging nod. Good. That's the first step. Jake felt a shift. A powerful feeling of unity pulsed through the room. He glanced around at the faces, old and young, veterans and families, all coming together. Then it hit him like a freight train. This was more than just about Frank or the young man. This was about healing the wider community. A silence settled in, everybody holding their breath as if waiting for a storm to break. Okay then, Oliver finally said, voice low, but rising in strength. Let's hear it. Jake felt a swell of hope, mixing with apprehension. Would this crude slap in the diner lead to healing? As Frank moved to face the young man, Jake could sense the end of one chapter and the tentative beginning of another. And he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was about to happen could change everything. Would they find common ground? Or was this only the start of a bigger conflict? Frank took a step closer, the familiarity of the diner fading away as he focused solely on the young man. Years of experience weighed behind his words, the lives he touched echoing in the air around them. I know you're scared, he began, voice steady yet gentle. But it's okay. We've all been there. The young man shifted his weight from foot to foot, eyes darting between Frank and the group. His tough exterior melted just a little, the bravado fading under the weight of the moment. I didn't mean, he stammered, voice barely a whisper. Frank raised a hand, a gesture of peace, and the tension in the room hung like a fragile thread. You didn't mean to, but it happened. And it's affected more than just me. It's important that we talk, understand the impact of our actions. People leaned in, instinctively drawn to Frank's calm presence. Mabel felt her heart beat a little faster. She knew this moment was pivotal, a chance for transformation. We rely on each other in this life, Frank continued, his words wrapping around the young man. There are people, friends, family who've sacrificed everything for freedom. Sometimes we forget what that really means. It's easy to get lost in our own worlds. The young man's brow creased as he listened, visibly wrestling with his feelings. Frank's voice was like a hand reaching out in darkness. You might be feeling anger, or maybe you don't understand why people are upset with you. I want to help you see that. Can you tell me how you felt when you did what you did? A murmur rippled through the crowd as silence settled, the weight of the question hanging heavily. The young man's face turned red. He opened his mouth, closed it, and then finally swallowed hard. I thought it was a joke, he said. The confession slipped out, raw and vulnerable. Frank nodded slowly, absorbing the words. Sometimes we think our actions don't have consequences, especially in a moment that feels lighthearted. But what about those who have felt the sting of loss? Who have sat alone, thinking about their loved ones who never came back? A visible shift occurred. The young man's eyes glassed over, understanding dawning on his features. I didn't connect, he admitted. Mark crossed his arms, his earlier frustration softening as he caught onto the shift. It's not too late. We all make mistakes, but it's what we learn from them that matters. The diner seemed to exhale. Strangers exchanged glances, recognition flashing among them. This was the power of community, the ability to understand and accept one another's flaws while striving for growth. Jake felt hope blooming in the pit of his stomach. Mabel took a step forward, her heart racing. You're not alone in this. It's what we do now that counts, she said. Her voice was laced with belief. The young man nodded, a flicker of determination igniting within him. I want to understand, really understand. Frank smiled, the kindness in his eyes shining brightly, radiating warmth. Then let's have that conversation. As their words tangled in the air, the diner came alive. The tension melted away, replaced by camaraderie. Here, heartbeats synced, and laughter would soon echo off the walls. But just as the first hints of connection began to take shape, a loud crash interrupted the moment, drowning out their intent. The diner's entrance swung open wide, revealing a figure gasping for breath, panic etched on his face. "Run!" he shouted. "It's outside, things are about to get worse." The air thickened with confusion and alarm, and just like that, everything shifted again. What lay ahead? Could they find strength together when it felt like the world was crumbling around them? The diner's atmosphere swirled from a moment of connection to sheer chaos. Frank felt his heart race. The feeling of reassurance was replaced by the sharp bite of fear as the man at the door stumbled inside. His torn clothing and wild eyes told a story of urgency. "Run," he repeated, breathless. "You don't understand, there's something out there. It's coming." Everyone stood frozen. The weight of his words sank in slowly, like sinking into deep water. Frank glanced around, his instincts kicking in. The young man he had just reached out to looked paralyzed, eyes wide with terror. Mabel's grip on the table tightened, knuckles pale. "Hey!" Frank shouted, breaking through the haze of shock. "What do you mean? What's outside?" The man shook his head, desperation etched on his face. "I don't know exactly, but there were noises, screaming. Something's on the road, and it's making its way here." Jake's breath caught in his throat. The sense of community they had just woven together felt fragile now, as if it might shatter under pressure. People began to murmur, glancing at each other, eyes glistening with uncertainty. Frank stepped forward, grounding himself. "Everyone, listen. We can't panic. We need to stay together, stay calm. Mabel, get the back door ready. Jake, you help me secure the front. We'll need to keep everyone safe if something is indeed coming." The young man slowly began to regain his composure. "What can I do?" he asked, his earlier bravado replaced by a determination to contribute. "I need you to help Mabel," Frank directed. "Keep her calm. She'll need someone strong next to her." As Mabel and the young man moved toward the back and Jake assisted in barricading the front, the energy in the diner shifted again. Frank felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, but he also sensed the unifying force of their collective fear. Each passing second felt like a lifetime. People whispered amongst themselves, eyes darting toward the windows. The once comfortable diner had abruptly transformed into a haven of uncertainty. Then came the sound, a low rumble at first, like thunder rolling in from the horizon, followed by the uneasy creaks of the building as if acknowledging the tension. "What is that?" someone asked, their voice quaking. Frank leaned closer to the window, straining to see. In the distance, shadows danced under the faint light of the street lamps. The realization struck him then, whatever it was moving fast. "Get everyone together," Frank shouted over his shoulder. "We need to get to the back now." Mabel, the young man, and the rest of the crowd rushed toward Frank, a wave of worried faces moving as one. With everyone gathered near the back, Frank took a deep breath. "Whatever's out there, we face it together," he urged, trying to instill resolve in their eyes. "We may be scared, but we're not alone. Stay strong." Just then, a loud bang reverberated across the building as something heavy hit the door. The diners jumped back, fear rising like a tide. Frank's pulse quickened, and he felt every heartbeat pounding in his chest. They could almost taste the tension, the air thick and electric. "What are we going to do?" the young man asked, a hint of courage still in his voice, but wavering. As they strained to listen, a voice from the darkness called out, "Help us! We need your help!" Pure instinct kicked in then. Frank realized they weren't alone out there. His heart raced anew, pushing him to act. But who was calling? And what did they want? The urgency of the moment hung like a storm about to break, and Frank prepared to step into the unknown once more. Frank's hand gripped the edge of the table. The startling call from outside echoed in his mind, and a heavy dread settled in his stomach. "Help us!" The plea was urgent and raw, reverberating through the tension that gripped them all. He looked into the wide, fearful eyes of the diners around him. Mabel stood with the young man, her fingers nervously twisting together. There was uncertainty in their faces. A fear mingled with the flicker of hope that maybe help was within reach. What if it's a trap? Someone whispered, breaking the stillness. The thought hung like a shadow in the room, feeding the fear that was creeping through all of them. We can't leave them out there, Frank replied, his voice steady. We have to find out who they are. He knew that every second they waited felt like an eternity. The more they hesitated, the more danger might lurk just beyond the door. Stay close, he instructed the group firmly, steeling himself. Jake, Mabel, and the rest get ready to move. If we're gonna open that door, we need to be ready for anything. The diners exchanged worried glances but nodded, driven by an instinct for survival. They positioned themselves, tension evident in every muscle. Frank approached the door, heart thumping loud enough he was sure everyone could hear it. He peeked through the window, the glass fogged with unease. Outside, shadows blurred together, casting eerie shapes. The cold air seemed to seep into the diner, wrapping around him like a chilling embrace. Who are you? Frank called, voice steady but laced with caution. What do you need? For a moment there was silence. Then, the voice came again, this time clearer and more desperate. Please, we were attacked. We have nowhere else to go. Frank turned to the group, noting the flicker of empathy in their eyes. If they really were in danger, if they needed help, could they really turn them away? We're on the run. The voice continued, frantic now. There's something. Something has come alive. We thought we were safe on the road, but they found us. Mabel's hand instinctively reached out to grab the young man's wrist. Frank glanced at her, seeing the fear that was mirrored in everyone's face. What if it's a mistake to open the door? She whispered, fear creeping into her voice. It's a risk, I know, Frank responded, the weight of leadership heavier than ever. But we can't just stand here. The choice to help is ours to make. As he turned back to the door, each breath felt thicker, heavier. Frank gripped the handle, envisioning every possible outcome. Whatever came next, safety or danger, it couldn't be avoided. That decision had to be made now. He hesitated just a heartbeat before pulling the door open, revealing a chaotic scene beyond the threshold. Two figures stumbled forward, breathless with terror, their clothes torn and faces streaked with mud. In that instant, the shadows that had loomed large suddenly formed into human shapes, full of desperation and fear. Please, one of them murmured, we need your help. They're coming for us. But before Frank could respond, a low growl erupted from the darkness beyond the light of the diner, a sound that made every hair on his body stand on end. What was that? The young man breathed, staring wide-eyed at the open door, horror registering on his face. Frank's heart sank as an answer unfolded in the night, revealing the dread that lurked just outside, growing ever closer. How could they welcome this new danger with open arms? How could they save those seeking refuge when greater threats loomed? The shadows began to move, shifting ominously while noises clawed at the edges of his sanity. What next? He wondered, staring into the uncertainty of the night. The door hung open, the very boundary between safety and terror, the choice hanging delicately in the air. Frank's heart raced as he took in the distress etched on the faces before him. The newcomers were young, eyes wide with fear, and a palpable desperation clung to them like the dirt that lined their clothes. They were not simply lost. They were pursued. The growl echoed again, more pronounced now, making the very walls of the diner tremble. Frank took a deep breath, defying the instinct to slam the door shut and embrace the false safety it promised. Come in, he shouted, urgency molding his voice into a firm command. The young man and woman stumbled through the threshold, nearly tumbling into Frank. He caught the young man by the shoulder, steadying him. What's chasing you? What's not? The young woman cried, her voice cracking with panic. They came out of nowhere. We saw them take our friends, just grabbed them. Jake, the diner's cook, stepped forward, brow furrowed with concern. You got to tell us what we're up against. He scanned their faces, trying to gauge their truthfulness and intent. They're like beasts, the young man stammered, catching his breath. Animals, but smarter. They follow, They hunt. His voice trailed off as he swayed slightly, exhaustion washing over him. Frank felt the weight of the group's fear magnifying by the second. He turned to Mabel, who looked ready to bolt. "We need to get everyone inside and lock the door," he commanded, his voice rising over the terrified whispers. "Jake, help them. Mabel, get the others ready. Frank, what if they follow them in?" Mabel's voice trembled, her concern piercing through his resolve. "We have to take that chance," he replied, choking down his own fear. The urgency in his gut overwhelmed him. In a world that suddenly seemed filled with unimaginable horrors, they had to protect themselves, but they also had to protect those who had arrived on their doorstep. Once the young man and woman were inside, Frank hastily pulled the door shut, sealing the ominous night and its dangers outside. There was a collective exhalation of breath from the group, but it was quickly replaced by a suffocating silence. They gathered around the newcomers like moths drawn to a flickering flame, a mix of pity and fear paralyzing their movements. The growl muffled, replaced by rustling outside the diner. Frank motioned for quiet, and the group instinctively drew in closer. He heard the low thud of paws against the ground. Whatever was out there was no longer hiding. They were circling, assessing their next move. "Do you have any weapons?" Frank asked, turning to the young man, who was nearly collapsed on the diner floor. Just a knife," he said, pulling a small blade from his pocket, shaking hands exposing his weakness. "Okay," Frank said, trying to muster a plan. "We need to barricade the door. Mabel, grab those chairs. Everyone else, help." They sprang into action, adrenaline kicking in as tables scraped against the floor, forming a makeshift barrier. Moments later, a loud crash sounded outside, causing everyone to jump. Frank's heart thudded painfully in his chest. He turned to the group, facing them, voices filled with urgency. "Stay behind the barricade. If they get in, we don't fight, we run." The young woman's eyes darted around the dim light of the diner, panic rising. "What do we do if they break through?" "We stay together," Frank answered resolutely, not revealing the tremors beneath his calm facade. "No one gets left behind." The dreadful crashing intensified again, mingling with the chaotic rustling outside, an ugly promise of what was to come. The door shuddered under the impact of something determined and worldly. Frank swallowed hard, bracing himself against the table, the feeling of an impending storm washing over the diner like a wave. "What has been unleashed on us?" he whispered to himself as the growl roared once more, louder than before, sending chills racing down his spine. Outside, shadows danced restlessly, an inky silhouette of terror, and there was no turning back. Would they fight or flee? The answer hung in the air, twisting the tension tighter as they all braced for the next blow. In the stillness, as they prepared for the fight of their lives, one thought pierced through Frank's mind. Was it truly survival if their world was reduced to this fleeting, frantic moment? The diner was a whirlwind of fear and apprehension. Frank looked around, his heart pounding louder than the growls outside. Mabel was almost at the point of tears, and Jake's brow was knit tightly as he glanced at the barricaded door. The newcomers huddled together, looking like childlike shadows clutching at the remnants of hope. Jason, the young man with the knife, leaned against the counter for support, still glancing anxiously toward the door. "They're not just animals, they have a plan," he murmured, as if talking to himself. "They know how we think, what we fear." "Don't you dare say that," Frank shot back, the heat of unexpected anger bubbling up. "We don't need more fear." But deep down, the logic cut through his bravado. What if Jason was right? A low growl slipped through the door, thick with menace. Frank felt the weight of eyes upon him, piercing and desperate. He had to act decisively, or everything they cared about would vanish in the dark. "Jake, grab the pan," Frank shouted, pointing toward the metal skillet by the grill. "Any noise will keep them away." "Mabel, can you reach the radio? We need to drown this out." They moved like a well-coordinated dance, fueled by tightened resolve, adrenaline washing over their fear. Mabel, wide-eyed, rippled through the kitchen and turned the dial. Static crackled and hissed, filling the air with chaotic noise, an attempt to drown out their impending doom. Jason stood straighter, an edge of clarity breaking through his panic. We need to prepare a distraction. Frank shot him a questioning look. What do you mean? If they're smart, they're just watching. If we can move somewhere, make noise somewhere else, maybe they'll lose focus. An empty stall, Mabel interjected, her eyes lighting up with the idea. We could throw something out there, create enough noise to lure them away. No, Frank gasped, horrified at the thought. But as he looked around, he realized he didn't have a choice. The growling grew closer, more pronounced, the air thick with their menace. Okay, he relented. But we need cover. Jake, can you take the front? Mabel, head to the side window. Jason, stay next to me. Each of them nodded, taking their places in the plan, nervous energy pulsing through their veins. The crashing outside ceased for a moment, a dreadful stillness enveloping the diner. Frank steadied his breath, close enough to feel Jason's racing heart next to him. This was it, the moment of truth. Without warning, Frank threw open the back door and shouted into the darkness, a sound filled with raw desperation and bravery. Hey, over here. Then he sent a glass flying out of the door, the shattering echo ricocheting against the walls. It was a gamble. Would it lure the beasts? His mind raced in a fierce battle between hope and dread. The growls erupted again, louder, and raged. Something large rustled just beyond the dim light of the diner, and in that instant, time stood still. Now, he shouted, adrenaline fueling their frantic scramble. Jake raised the skillet and banged it against the counter, the sound slicing through the air like a knife. But just as they had hoped to see movements beyond the walls, the growling stopped. An eerie silence blanketed them, leaving every breath suspended in uncertainty. What did we do? Mabel whispered, trembling. I don't know, Frank admitted, swallowing hard. But it seems like they've changed tactics. Suddenly, a shape emerged from the shadows, and every muscle in Frank's body tensed as they braced for the worst. The light flickered, revealing ominous eyes glimmering in the darkness. Stay back, he yelled, taking a protective step forward. In that moment, all they had fought for, all their hopes hung in the air like a low-hanging fog. But as the figure drew closer, Frank's heart sank at the realization. The beasts weren't the only danger in the night. And just as hope began to darken beneath the weight of despair, a familiar voice pierced through, filled with defiance. Get away from them. Frank's breath caught. Could it be? Or was this yet another cruel trick of the night? A figure stepped into the weak light cast by the diner, and Frank's eyes widened in disbelief. It was not one of the beasts they had dreaded. It was Claire, his daughter, her face streaked with dirt, but her eyes shined with determination. Claire, he exclaimed, his heart swelling with relief. She had come back. Dad, I heard you. I came as fast as I could. Claire's voice was frantic, but there was a fierce strength in her stance. You have to get everyone inside. Trust me, I know these creatures, they're not just animals. They were once part of a secret testing site. The tension in the diner shifted instantly. The group was re-energized, their fear morphing into renewed hope. Frank felt a rush of emotions as he stepped aside, allowing Claire to step into the light. Behind her, the shadows twitched, and for a moment, the world felt suspended in uncertainty. What do you mean testing site? Jake asked, the kitchen tools clattering to the ground again as the adrenaline coursed through him. What were we facing, really? I'll explain everything. But there's no time, Claire insisted, panic creeping back into her tone. They've been bred for intelligence. They hunt by sound and instinct, but they're drawn to fear. I saw many of them on my way, and they can smell indecision from a mile away. Jake exchanged looks with Mabel and Jason. This was no ordinary escape plan. It was a fight against something they couldn't fully comprehend. What can we do? Mabel asked, steeling her resolve. Let us make this diner a fortress, Claire declared, her voice cutting through the tension. We can use the kitchen. These creatures are curious but also smart. Bait them where we want them, then create barriers. Frank nodded, heart racing, energized by her spirit. Let's do it. Everyone. We need to clear the tables and grab anything we can use as barricades, and start making noise. With Claire leading the charge, everyone sprang into motion. They began moving heavy tables, stacking them together against the windows. Mabel and Jason worked on blocking the kitchen door, while Jake and Claire pushed heavy bar stools towards the entrance, creating a barricade. The growl outside shifted into a series of sharp barks, startling them. The belly-wrenching sound seeped into their resolve. But amidst that fear, strength blossomed within the group, pushing them to focus on survival and community. "Now!" Frank shouted, gripping the skillet and banging it in rhythm against the counter again. "Keep that going." Mabel and Jason joined in, using their voices and the metal utensils as a drum beneath the pulsating fear that enveloped them. Claire positioned herself near the back entrance, watching the building shadows from behind the barricade, her stare fierce. "Hold your ground and stand together," she urged. Her confidence encouraged everyone. As if by sheer force, they could shield each other from what was about to come. Suddenly, something crashed against the diner's front door. Shaking with an unforgiving force, it rattled the barricade they had hastily constructed. The sudden sound sent a wave of terror through the group, yet they remained steadfast. "Breathe," Frank commanded. "Focus on keeping it together." And just then, to their surprise, Claire and the others heard something new, voices shouting outside, urging them to hold tight. "The winds are shifting." The shouts echoed, moments before a heavy thud struck again against the barricade at the front. "Who's there?" Frank called out, gritting his teeth, wondering if more chaos was joining the fray. Yet amidst despair, some nearby shapes glimmered in the darkness, the faint silhouette of people, armed and shouting back. "Stand down. We're here to help." A voice rang out like a lifeboat in turbulent seas. Just as relief washed over them, a group of local townsfolk and off-duty officers rushed into the light of the diner. The energy shifted instantly. What was once fear morphed into a surge of hope. "Fortify the entrance," they shouted, seamlessly melding into the makeshift defenses. The commotion from outside intensified as more townsfolk joined. The fray, bringing cheers with them, bolstering their courage. "Keep pushing back. We won't let them take this place." With a collective vision of unity, the diner transformed into a bastion, a safe haven beneath a storm of uncertainty. Frank felt the connection grow deeper than he'd ever understood. People, fear-conquering hearts, fighting together hand in hand against the darkness that loomed. Suddenly, the creatures outside let out a collective howl, a primal shout that echoed the depths of the night, sending shivers down their backs. But together, they fought back, bolstered by each other's spirit. "This is our home," Frank yelled, a roar of unity rising up and crashing against the sounds of chaos as the strength of community wrapped around him. Frank glanced at Claire, at Mabel, Jake, and the young ones who had once been strangers. They were bound together now by shared fear and bravery. And as they braced for the oncoming storm, the realization washed over him. Love, community, and resilience were worth the fight. They were not alone. They would protect the diner, protect each other, and together they would face whatever darkness awaited. The sounds of battle mixed with laughter, hope, and a fierce determination to fight for their lives and each other resonated against the howls outside, a beautiful symphony of resolve. In that moment, Frank understood. They could weather this storm, together, and they would emerge stronger, each heartbeat a reminder of their unbreakable bond. Now is the time for you to take action. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Lean into community, it's at the core of that connection. Drop a like now to feed the algorithm, and show your support. This is the moment. We need to hear from you. So comment your reactions and feelings about this impactful ending. And don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Together, we empower our community.